Now, someone from inside the investigation is speaking out, and what they're saying doesn't just raise questions. It directly challenges how this case has been handled from the very beginning. This source didn't go public with their identity. They couldn't. According to them, doing so could cost them their career, their position, everything. That alone tells you how serious this is, because people inside law enforcement don't just break ranks like this, not unless something is deeply wrong. And according to this insider, something is. They describe the early handling of the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie as a rush to judgment, an assumption made almost immediately that Nancy had wandered off, and one that shaped the entire direction of the investigation. Think about the weight of that claim. Because if that's true, then this wasn't just a mistake. It was a foundational error, one that influenced every decision that followed. Every search, every delay, every missed opportunity. The source goes further. They claim that the investigation was effectively run as a search and rescue operation in those early stages, not as a potential crime scene. And by the time the possibility of something more serious was fully acknowledged, critical time had already been lost. Time that, in cases like this, can mean everything. They also raise concerns about experience. According to the source, some of the individuals responsible for overseeing the initial response did not have significant homicide investigation experience. That includes leadership at the scene. Now ask yourself this: when you have blood at a door, a missing elderly woman, and a camera ripped from the wall, is that the moment to hesitate? Or is that the moment you bring in your most experienced people immediately? Because hesitation doesn't just slow things down, it changes outcomes. And then there's the issue of the crime scene itself. The source claims that investigators had to return to the location multiple times, reprocessing, re-examining, essentially going back over ground that should have been secured and handled properly the first time. That's not standard. That's a problem. Because every time a scene is reopened, every time it's accessed again after being released, the integrity of that scene comes into question. Evidence becomes harder to trust, timelines become harder to establish, and defense attorneys, if this case ever reaches that point, gain more room to challenge what was found. Former FBI agent Steve Moore has warned about exactly this kind of situation. Once a scene is compromised, even slightly, the ripple effects can be enormous. You're no longer working with certainty, you're working with doubt. And doubt can kill a case. But what may be even more troubling is what the source says about the current state of the investigation. There is no suspect. Let that sink in. After weeks, after months, after national attention, after countless hours of work, there is still no clear person of interest. According to the source, there isn't even a name on the table. And that leads to a chilling possibility. Either the person responsible is incredibly lucky, or they were calculated enough to cover their tracks in a way that has kept them completely invisible. But even that explanation doesn't sit right with everyone. Because when you look at the scene itself, the blood, the missing camera, the apparent struggle, it doesn't necessarily suggest a mastermind. It suggests something more chaotic, more rushed, more human. Which brings the focus back, once again, to the investigation. If the offender wasn't perfect, then why haven't they been caught? That's the question that's now hanging over everything. And it's not just coming from the outside. Inside the department, according to the source, morale is extremely low. Words like embarrassment are being used. There's frustration, there's tension, there's a sense that things are not going the way they should. Even more telling, the source describes an environment where people are walking on eggshells. Think about what that means in the context of an active investigation. When investigators don't feel comfortable speaking freely, when there's hesitation, when internal confidence is shaken, it doesn't just affect morale. It affects performance. It affects communication. It affects results. And at the center of all of this is leadership. The source is openly critical of Chris Nanos, suggesting that decisions made at the top may have contributed to the current state of the case. That's a serious claim, one that the sheriff has not directly responded to in this context. Publicly, he has maintained that he stands by the investigation, that his team is experienced, that the work has been solid. But behind the scenes, according to this insider, the reality may look very different. There are even references to a broader lack of confidence within the department. Not just frustration, but a deeper issue of trust in leadership. And when that kind of divide exists, it doesn't stay hidden. It shows up in the way cases are handled, in the way decisions are made, in the way people communicate or don't. And it raises another difficult question. What the public has been seeing, is it the full picture? Because from the outside, there have been press conferences, statements, assurances that everything is being done, that the investigation is moving forward. But from the inside, the picture being painted is one of tension, doubt, and unresolved concerns. Two very different realities, and somewhere between them is the truth. Meanwhile, the family continues to wait. Savannah Guthrie has remained composed in public, strong, measured, supportive of law enforcement, even as the case drags on without answers. That balance isn't easy, because frustration is natural, anger is understandable, but publicly turning against investigators can sometimes do more harm than good. It can create pressure in the wrong places. It can disrupt progress. So instead, she's done something else. She's kept the focus where it belongs, on Nancy, on bringing her home. And the community has followed. Outside a local station, a banner stretches across a wall. Bring her home. It's covered in messages, prayers, names from people who have never met Nancy but feel connected to her story. People from different cities, different states, all writing the same thing in different ways. Come home. Stay strong. We're praying. That kind of response doesn't happen for every case. It happens when something resonates. When something feels wrong. And this case feels wrong to a lot of people. Because at its core, it's simple. An elderly woman vanished. There were signs that something had happened. And yet, months later, there are still no answers. So what happened to Nancy Guthrie? Was this a carefully planned act carried out by someone who knew exactly what they were doing? Or was it something else? Something that might have been solved if those first hours had gone differently? That's the question that continues to hang over this case. And until it's answered, the doubts aren't going anywhere. If you've followed this story this far, then you already know. Something about it doesn't sit right. So now I want to hear from you. What do you think happened? Do you believe this was just a difficult case? Or do you think critical mistakes may have changed its course? Because in cases like this, awareness matters, attention matters, and sometimes the more people looking closely, the harder it becomes for the truth to stay hidden. If you want to keep following cases like this, real stories, real questions, and real consequences, make sure you're here for the next one, because this case isn't over.